This is the Slots and Sockets podcast, episode number 68. I am one of your hosts, IRD Moose, and my partner in crime,
Turbo Penguin.
Happy Tuesday, Turbo.
How's it going?
A lot better than your internet has been.
Hey, it's working now, so we'll take it.
It is. Fingers crossed. Good Lord willing, the creek don't rise, as they say. So, we got some fun stories to talk about today. What do we want to start with?
Oh, goodness gracious. What do we want to start with?
We've got a buffet.
Well, yeah. I think what we should do is talk about just main topic.
Sure.
Is super. Let's just talk about being super.
Dive right in. We can always get some good news later.
Yeah, rumor wise, and this is kind of no surprise because they've done this, I think, every time around.
Every generation since the 10 series, yeah.
Yeah,
when they
they've always had a TI, and now they started with TI, and now they're going to have the Super series. And the 4080 Super was a great card, and considering that the 4080 vanilla before was $200 more, the 4080 Super was a great card.
Yep.
So the question will be is where do all these these cards slot in? The thing is that only one of the three super cards is going to get a bump in CUDA cores.
Well, so usually it would be PCI Express by 16, but you could do by 8 if you... Oh, wait, you were talking about in the product stack. Never mind.
Yeah, product stack. So the 5080 Super is going to have the same number of CUDA cores.
Right.
They are going to bump the power usage a good chunk, 50, 60. That I think the power usage on all these is kind of up in the air. The thing is I think because the only way that they're getting speed out of the 5080 Super, the 5070 Ti Super, and the 5070 Super is memory and power. So this is going to use more power across the board. 30, 40, 50, 70 watts, depending on where you see it.
Yep.
But the core count is staying the same minus the 5070 Super. That has, legitimately a 3% bump in core count.
Interesting.
But it has a 33% increase in memory availability.
Okay.
Same with the 5070 Ti. Same cores, bump on the VRAM, and it's be a bump in power. So the only way that these cards are going to go faster is if one of two things: either they were topped out on the RAM side of things, or two, the processor just couldn't go fast enough. And the only way to fix that is to give it more RAM, which they're doing across the board, and to give it more power, which they're doing.
So right now, if I'm remembering the specs of the 5070 correctly, with it having
6100 cores,
was 6100 cores.
Yep.
But let's just start at the bottom, work our way up. The 5070 Super now is going to have 18 gigs of memory.
Yeah.
So now they are saying a 5070 Super has more memory than a vanilla 5080. Make that make sense.
Well, how it makes sense is I think that the 5080 has got 10,700 CUDA cores, and the 5070 Super has 6,400. So the real difference is going to be the horsepower. Obviously, computationally, the 5080 is going to be much faster.
Is that going to be enough to not be bottlenecked by 16 gigs?
Here's the thing. I think I think the number one thing we need to learn about Nvidia is you never buy the first version of something.
Yep. Hence the title of the show.
You never had you bought a 4080 at the beginning, I get it. You had usage for that time, and it was a decent card. Okay. Yep. and I get it. But had you waited, you would spend $200 less,
Mhm.
and you would have gotten a faster card. Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
End of story. This is holding true. You
Mhm.
know, I would be pissed, absolutely pissed, if I was dumb enough to have bought a 5070 original, the vanilla,
Yeah.
because it's 12 gigs. That car is going to age horribly. Now, the 5070 Super is going to be very interesting because it doesn't really have a speed boost. I mean, it does use some more power. We're talking 25 to maybe 50. I don't think it's going to be 50, but maybe. Let's just maybe.
Well, from what I've seen from a lot of the testing going on these cards, they're pretty much power limited. They're not thermal or really voltage limited. It's legitimately power.
Uh,
And so
yeah, but I
bumping up the
also,
power limit's gonna help you grab a couple more boost bins. So, you
yeah,
know,
I mean, it's not that they don't run overly hot. I mean, the 5090 can run hot when you really, really push it.
right.
And same with the 5080.
Yeah.
Um, all these cards do have a thermal limit, but you're right. It's not like it's sitting there at 95C, using 10% of your your GPU.
Like, yeah,
Um,
like the 3090
but
did at
the,
times. Yeah.
the truth of the matter, and this is where all of this is coming out, is this 5080 Super is what the 5080 should have been from day
Mhm.
one.
Yeah.
The 5070 Ti Super is what the 5070 Ti should have been on day one.
Yep.
And the 5070 Super is what should have been the 5070. Had they done this correctly, they would have had a very, very strong product.
Yeah.
And one that I would say, in all honesty, um, nowhere near. I think you would not have seen AMD's 9000 series be reviewed so positively.
Mhm. Well, yeah, because it would have been comparing to something that's significantly more performant.
Now,
You know.
one thing to point out here, really interesting. The 5070 Ti has a 256-bit bus. The 5070 Ti Super is slated to have a 192-bit bus.
Hmm.
The only thing that I can think of is that they're again gimping the CI Super because they don't want to encroach on the 5080.
Yeah, but if
It
you have
is it is like 1800 CUDA core short,
Mhm.
but it does have some boost at 350 to 375 watts. It might be using more power than a 5080, and if the power limitation is legitimately there, um, I think the 192-bit bus was put in place purely to slow
Bottleneck
that
it.
card down.
Yeah. I mean, that's possible. It's because that's what Nvidia usually does is, they'll put the full fat bus on the higher tier cards, the 80s and the 90s, but
I mean,
they will usually tune it down for the 70s and below.
if if we're looking at it right, of which of these three cards we should be most excited about, the 5080 Super. Now the question is going to come as to price.
Yeah.
That is the loaded question
Yep.
because you cannot find a 5080 below, like, I think it's like 1,200 to 1,300 bucks right now. They just don't exist. So, um, if we look at the three cards, the 5080, the Ti Super, and the 5070 Super,
Yeah.
um, in all honesty, I think the card that most people are going to be excited about are the 5080 Super
Mhm.
and the 5070 Super.
Yeah, and I think of the lineup, if they keep the pricing reasonably within the MSRP and they actually ship at MSRP, we might see the 5070 kind of take its normal place, or the 70 super variant take its normal place as the value king for the generation.
I mean,
I mean, I'd love to see that. I hope we start seeing MSRP cards, but you know, you
I
never
think
know.
I think the reason that I'm probably more excited about those two cards, in all honesty,
Hmm.
is because I feel like those cards actually can utilize the bump in memory usage.
Yeah.
Like a
Yeah.
5080 with 24 gigs, I just felt like that should how it was.
Well, yeah,
And
that's what
me
we
and
said when it
every,
was announced.
me and everybody else
Yeah.
railed on the 5070 only with 12 gigs.
Yep.
Like that was just a travesty. I'm really glad that it's probably the worst selling of all the cards. Um, but I think the 5070 Super is a really probably a good mid-range card,
Hmm.
and one that I probably come review time. The loaded question will be reviews. Um, Probably way it's going to be reviewed better than the 5070.
Right.
Um, we've given AMD, I mean Nvidia, half a year to fix their drivers. They're still making progress. It's still sort of, it sucks less. We'll just say that. Um, but it's a work in progress, at least for them. So hopefully they're using less AI and extra people to do their drivers, and we'll see what that looks like.
Yep.
So,
That's a
um,
good deal.
speaking and continue on with the 50 series, 5050. How is this even a thing?
It they
Like
need
friends don't
they
let
need an
friends buy 8
excuse.
gig cards or 12 gig cards anymore. I
Yeah.
feel like there should be friends don't let friends buy 50 series cards.
Well,
Like it just
50/50s. The X50, yeah.
the 4050 suck. They're like
Yeah.
they all just absolutely garbage.
Like, you only buy those cards unless you are desperate for having display output.
I
That's
mean,
really
here's
it.
here's the thing though, is like if you look at it, it's more anemic than a 5060, and that was a horribly reviewed
And
piece.
and some of them, if I remember correctly, have power connectors. The whole selling
Yeah,
point of the 50 series was it's all bus powered.
yeah, they could.
Like,
I
what the
mean,
heck, guys?
well, okay, we've talked about this before. There's a
Yeah.
reason behind this,
Mhm.
because it's this all taped out to be 3 nanometer and it's not.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we're using more power. We're not getting the efficiency we were supposed to get with the lower process. And that's really, in all honesty, that is the failure of the entire Blackwell stack,
Yeah.
is that it was, you design it for a process, you set it up for a process, and then after you've had 6, 9, 12 months, you realize, holy crap, I'm going to miss my deadline unless I move this. And you had to go backwards to a 4,
Yeah.
or is it 5? Actually, I think
I
it
think
went
it's
to a
5
5.
nanometer. Yeah.
So it was taped out to be a more finite process. And I mean, that's why we're at the top end of the stack at the 5090,
Yeah.
because they can't get more um, reasonably out unless adding more power connectors. And somehow Nvidia is really scared of having more than one power connector.
Right, but Asus doesn't seem to be,
Yeah,
because
Asus. Oh my
they've
gosh.
got a cool solution now.
Well, okay, so let's talk about this. I mean, we've seen BTF,
Mhm.
the Project Zero from, I think it was Asus,
Asus, it
and
was CES
and
2024.
ZXT
Yeah,
had one. They had these where you basically had PCs with, from the outside looking in, and had um zero cables,
0 wires, yep.
no wires. Um, well, and then Asus and some of them were like, hey, we could actually do a power connector in line with the PCI Express connection and
Mhm.
actually get power without actually having it.
Yep,
Um, they've released power supplies and motherboards and um, graphics cards that now do this.
yep,
Now, one of the things they were saying is that because of this, that the PCBs are longer. But one thing people need to realize is that if you have a 5090 and it's this long, your PCB is actually only this long.
yeah.
They aren't full length PCBs.
It's only
So
about as long as the slot itself. So,
yeah,
you're going
this
back to a normal size.
it's going to a longer PCB.
Mhm.
I don't know if that is going to allow them to space things out to have some better thermals. I would hope that they would take that opportunity to maybe do that if there were some benefits.
Well, thermals are
But
really good on the 50 series as it is. I mean, especially with the Founders Edition stuff. But yeah, no, and one of the big selling points that I saw was Asus is talking about 1,000 watts of power delivery over their BTF connector, um, which huge if true. And if they can supply that power without using a 12-volt high power on the back of the board, you could just drop four PCI Express, standard PCI Express connectors on that board and rock and roll. But
yeah,
the other thing I saw on, I think it was Gamers Nexus, that there's some question because these cards also have a 12-volt high power on them, so you could deliver up to 600 watts that way. But the question was, could you potentially use both and provide 1,600 watts of potential power capacity? Which, if you're a crazy nuts liquid nitrogen overclocker, or you got a big budget where you could get some liquid helium into your pot, then you could do some very interesting things with 1,600 watts of overhead and a modified BIOS on an Astral.
I mean,
Because
like if you look
wow.
at some of these extreme overclockers,
Mhm.
like Der Bauer, where they're actually like looking and electronically soldering in and tricking the power delivery system into thinking that it's actually delivering
Yeah.
when it's actually delivering more.
They're shunt mods, yeah.
Um,
Kingpin even
you
had add-on boards when he was working with EVGA that he'd tell you exactly how to solder it on up to
um,
whatever EVGA board you had. So yeah, I
so
mean it's doable. You can force it to accept that much power. The question
yeah,
is, can you get the BIOS to play nice?
well, and that's where the problem is that we don't see extreme overclocking boards like we used to. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of that's probably pushing down from AMD because they don't want anyone to have the ability to really and truly unlock these cards.
You mean Nvidia?
Sorry, whoever.
I'm
But
sure AMD would love to get on the leaderboards with some LN2 stuff,
you know
but
what? If AMD wants to, then AMD needs to work on their overclocking software because
yeah.
goodness gracious, it is really unresponsive and
Yep.
not very good.
It is
Um,
a pain to use and a
it
pain to
is
get
not
stable.
easy to use. Um,
Afterburner, though. Afterburner may have some AMD support coming up soon,
you know
at
who
least for the
I
9,000
have?
cards.
Gigabyte has an overclocking tool that works. The
Hmm.
problem is that is that sometimes you ask it to do a frequency and it just doesn't do it. And
Mhm.
it sits there and looks at you like, go fuck, go screw yourself. Um, and it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so
Yeah.
it's frustrating because like you sit there and say even if it was like I can't and like it would crash and then
Mhm.
revert back, at least you'd be like, okay, I can't do that.
Yeah. Where it just
Sometimes the
doesn't.
AMD
Yeah.
software is like, I don't feel like it,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't do
You,
it.
you
And you're
didn't
like,
you didn't give me my coffee today, you jerk. How dare you try to overclock me?
um,
I mean,
I
I
think
have
that's
Mondays like
one
that, so I get it.
that's one thing I think that we could see some improvement on. But
Right.
it really is a power limitation because if you only have one high volt power connector,
Yeah.
and you're using 575 watts, you're risking it when you go over that 500-watt connection.
Right. And I think that's partially why
That's why.
Galax with their Hall of Fame card added for their 5090 added two 12-volt high powers.
So
Um
I'm
cuz
so I'm interested in that card because we don't get
it's
Galax
cool.
here,
Yeah.
um, and
I
you
mean,
have
we
to
can, it's
import
just
it.
a pain. Yeah.
It's difficult,
Yeah.
um, but it's very interesting. That is a very unique brand in that it is really pushing for overclocking and really speed numbers,
Mhm.
but they have, at least from what I can gather, way better support than any of the other native U.S. manufacturers do for overclocking.
Yeah. Or
And
the Taiwan
I would
ones,
be
yeah.
interested to see and try to get a 5090 with a two eight high pult volt connectors to see if combined you're actually using more than the 575 watts. There's no reason to, unless you sit there and say, you know what, we're using 575 watts across two connectors and we don't have problems with the card frying itself.
Well, Jay Susense, in some of his testing, but from my memory, was seeing his 5090, his Astral, pull upwards of 700 for short bursts. So
I'm wondering
it's
if the
possible.
Astral is backing, like somewhere in the BIOS, the Astral is backing down, like it boosts to 700 and then falls back. Like it has a time
Yeah,
of how long it can actually go that higher power usage.
might.
And then it says, oh, too much, and it starts backing it down.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting thing from there. Let's see, what else do we have that's fun and exciting? Don't buy a 50/50,
Right.
instead buy a 40/60.
Yeah.
Um,
We got some good news from Team Blue, actually. So we had
okay.
some slides leak about Nova Lake,
But these are
hinting
Intel slides, right?
they are Intel slides,
Okay.
and they are hinting at a 10% per IPC boost in single-threaded applications, but it's not clear whether that's compared to the 285K or whether it's compared to the 14900K. I'm hoping it's the 14900K, because if it's compared to the 285K, that would kind of put it in single-threaded applications more or less on par with the 14900K, maybe a little bit ahead. But the big boost is coming in multi-threaded, where they're hinting at not 16, 1.6 times or 60%
Okay, so
improvement.
I'd like to see a raise of hands here real quick. Who thinks that this is going to be remotely possible? Yep, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Nobody. There is no
It
way
it I
Intel is going to give a 10%. I mean, even if it's against the 285K, which you apparently can't find almost anywhere because
right.
they're realizing it's not a good product.
Yeah.
10% over a bad product, or even 10% over a 14900K, which is not necessarily a bad product as long as it doesn't fry itself, is nowhere near where they're going to need to be
Right.
to compete with the even the 395 AI Max. I mean,
Yeah.
the next generation of Ryzen is so. I mean, they're big numbers.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody believes that they can a deliver, or B, even if they do, it's like, great, you finally caught up to 900X 3D. Oh, by the way,
10 series is here, and now we've got 64
10,800X
core.
3D with double this, double the cores and double the
Yeah.
VRAM, and is here. And oh, by the way, it just completely obliterates you. That's nice. You got 10%. They just
Yeah.
got 20%.
Well, and that's the thing, is like, we don't know what it's compared to. It could even be compared to an AMD part. Who knows?
It's probably, what would be
But
funny if it was like comparing to like the 12900K.
I mean,
Like, I wouldn't put it past them. Be like,
well,
comparative.
Nvidia's
Give me
been
just
doing the same thing with the 5050 and 5060. So I mean, yeah, Intel could do that. I hope they don't. I hope they're not doing that.
all I can
'Cause
say is that these are internal slides. And
yeah,
this is like, it just feels like it's like Intel's like, yeah, I guess we might be able to get 10%.
yeah.
Multi
60?
60.
Okay, we'll call it.
Could
Yeah.
could you? Sure. Will we? No. Could we? Maybe.
Maybe.
It just seems like it would be great if we get 10%. Wait, you said 10%? Yeah, can I put that in the slide? Sure, why not? Don't care.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
internally, it's just like, wait, I heard
This
somebody say
isn't going to
10%.
shareholders, right?
Right?
No.
I mean, so um it,
Yeah.
until we get a lot closer to release, anything we hear from Nova Lake is just going to be
It's
hopes
vaporware.
and dreams
Yeah.
from Intel's interior.
Yeah.
But kind of circling back, today actually was launch day for the 50/50, yet nobody has them.
Oh, great.
So the
The shortage
continuation of a paper
continues.
launch, the paper
Yeah.
launch is legitimate. And
Oh,
none of you
man.
don't have reviews. In fact, let me double check that to make sure that's correct. I haven't seen anything anywhere about reviews.
Well, we could
And
check your
so
favorite source, your local micro center.
now Micro Center, I did look, has nothing.
Okay.
Um,
Lame.
no, it is there is no 50/50.
So it is
It
another
is
paper launch. They
it is a
they
paper launch, but it's such a paper launch
yeah.
um, that they don't have reviews. Now, what that tells me is two things. The notion that they don't have reviews
Mm-hmm.
tells me that they view this card as absolute garbage.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you were like, come look at this and try to selling it, you would like parade it around. I feel like the 50/50 is going to end up like in a bunch of Dell Alienware and like HP Omen PCs. And they're like, it's got an RTX. And everyone's like, yeah, I got an RTX. And, like, you'll have like a kid open up like this desktop and mom who's like, oh my gosh, I spent so much money. And the kid's like, oh, it's got 50/50. You got freaking kidding me. And be like,
Yeah.
thanks, mom. Can I have $1,000? I need a real video card now.
It's like opening up a box that looks like a PlayStation 5 and inside it's one of those Temu knockoffs of a PlayStation that's actually like the X Game Box 360.
Well, what's interesting is it with the 50/50, um, is that it wasn't even like given to a few people to test out, like
Yeah.
with Nvidia's quote unquote rules for reviewing these. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, nobody gets them.
Yeah. Well, and
So
I think that's pretty normal for the 50 car, the X50s, because that there's really no fanfare to be had, and you kind of know where it's going to wind up landing anyway.
the interesting thing, now it's interesting now on their website, even though it's launched today,
Hmm.
um, Nvidia says it's coming the second half of July. Now, here's what hacks me off to no end. The 1050 Ti, when it originally came out, was 149.
Hmm.
And 149, you didn't have a lot of expectations because you're like, it's $150 video card, whatever.
Yeah.
At 249, you sort of have this thought that maybe there's going to be some performance here because
Right.
250 bucks. Um, I if you look at some of the leaks that now these are purely just leaks, but they're numbers on a spreadsheet, a chart that kind of looks somewhat official.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, nothing's official because nobody has this card because Nvidia has figured out that nobody should be reviewing this, and hopefully, my guess is that they're gonna let a couple weeks go and quietly release and be like, yeah, so that thing's out there now, and everyone's like, oh yeah, whatever. But a 50/50 is slower than a 40/60.
Yep.
Um, now they don't say if it's a 40/60 8 gig or 16 gig.
Hmm.
So if it was an 8 gig and it could use more, that would look really bad for a 50/50.
Yeah.
Um, so the other half I would say is if you look on used marketplace at 250, you can absolutely find graphics cards that are much worth your time at that price point. I'm just quickly, I just Googled, I mean, not Googled, I on Facebook Marketplace searched for GPU, and the first one here is $250 3070.
Yeah.
Now,
That.
granted, the VRAM is an issue, but it's the same amount of VRAM, you're probably actually faster.
Yeah.
Um, if you looked at some of these, to be honest, you'd probably want to find like here's a 3080 Ti for 325. That's a good deal for 12
Yeah.
gigs. You'd actually get some real performance out of that.
And a little
Um,
bit of longevity. Not a
oh,
whole
sure,
lot, but
more than the 3050,
mm-hmm.
50/50. So, anyways, notion is
Yeah.
50/50 sucks. All the 50 series have sucked. And it sucks even more because now you have to have an external power. And so you really don't have a use case, because you could have made the argument, well, maybe you should use like a little desktop thing that I don't need extra power. No, now you need extra power. And so it's not efficient. It's not fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely not quiet and cool. So yeah.
Yeah, but buying somebody an RTX and giving them a 50/50 is like saying, "Hey, I bought you a Lamborghini." It's a tractor. Same kind of reaction. You think it is one thing, but then it's not that thing. So, on that bombshell, I think we're going to call it a show for this evening. So, thank you all for giving us a little bit of your time. And I want to remind you to jump down the doobly-doo below and give us a like and a subscribe and drop us a comment and all that fun jazz that satisfies the ever-hungry YouTube algorithm. So, I think that about does it for this show. So until next time, have fun storming the castle.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.